Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Priyadarshika Subba, and I'm the research assistant here at ICM. I welcome you all to this panel discussion on an upcoming and crucial topic, emerging destinations in international migration, looking at East Asia. I welcome our CEO, Sri Abbagani Ramu, Joint Secretary OIA1, our esteemed panelists, Mr. Krishnan from Nihon EduTech, Mr. Gajendra Badgujar from Fiki, Mr. Maninder Singh from Ascertaining, and Dr. Shetri Mayur from VVG NLI, and friends and colleagues who have joined us here today. Just a few announcements before we begin. We have a very interesting session ahead, and to make it fruitful and outcome-oriented, I would like to request all of you to keep your mics on mute until you are invited to speak. I request all attendees, the participants, to use the chat box for the questions they would like to pose to panelists, and if possible, identify the panelists to whom it is addressed. So with these few introductory remarks, I would like to invite our CEO, Sri Abbagani Ramu, to deliver his welcome remarks. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Priyadarshika. So before I make a few remarks, let me welcome very warmly. I think today our CEO, Surabhi Singh, has taken the role of moderator because it is mainly our initiative. Basically, we want to learn from the panel discussants. And so let me also welcome Mr. Krishnan Narayanan, CEO, Nihon EduTech, and CIA partner for TATP. Very glad to have you, sir. And Mr. Gajendra Badgujar, Director Fiki. We have very close association since my days as a language training since 2003 onwards. So we grew together. He was in Fiki, I was in MEA, but good to have another association with a main project ahead of us. Mr. Maninder Singh, Co-Chairman Assocham, warm welcome. Nice to see you, sir. We would like to look forward to hear from you and also work with you for this particular things which we are going to discuss today. And Dr. Utojit Shetri Mayur, Fellow and Coordinator, VVG National Labour Institute, and all dear participants, very warm welcome. So the topic is in the wider context of East Asia, especially that looking at diversifying our destinations of our immigrants from the traditional areas of the Middle East, Gulf cooperation countries, and some of the European countries. So that focus is now on the East Asia. But let me also say that present circumstances also necessitated the need for us to think beyond our traditional areas and look for new areas. So there are many issues which are unique to East Asia, which are sometimes complementary for our capacities, especially when the people are in the dearth of young people and the society is graying and they need a lot of foreign workers. And at the same time that we have a very young society, and which can not only build our own country, but we can afford sparing some of our energies to help other countries. And we are in that situation. I think this is a mutually complementary situation. But thing I said just before starting meeting that especially in the East Asia, we have some another unique issues in addition to the normal issues faced during our migration and immigration. They are particularly in terms of language. Traditionally, our society is not exposed to those areas, and the language is not really very much comfortable for our people. But since there is a requirement, I think we have to raise our bar and see that how we can look at, because except language, there are many positive factors. The societies are very peaceful and they're very well developed. The basic wages and minimum referral wages are very high. So I think that will also be attractive, but provided we meet those requirements. So coming to the specific topic which I want to highlight today is that recently on 18th of January, the India and Japan have signed an agreement called Memorandum of Cooperation for developing institutional mechanism for creating a specialized skill skilled worker category. The categories are always there, but they have to formally identify a country. We have to accept that specialized skilled category of workers from that country. So we have that in place now. So on 18th we signed, and on 8th of February, very quickly we had first joint working group meeting. But after all this discussion, the main issues which came up are there are certain requirements to become skilled, specialized skilled workers to get the status. Those are one at the language level, and another is the skill level. As Mr. Krishnan mentioned earlier, I think we people are not very short of the skills which we require, which they require, Japan require, but the language becomes an issue, particularly when somebody is in a worker category, skilled worker category. So their focus is more on the work, but intellectually they may not be really diverting their attention towards learning a language. But since this is the requirement, I think they have capacity to meet that requirement also. But issue is not that human resources. Issue is to really create that opportunity for them to gain that skill to meet the requirement of that qualifying the tests in the language and in the skill. And that is the main crux of today's thing. I think, of course, in addition that there is also more awareness needs to be created. So this, the really creating the infrastructure may be existing, but bringing together to meet the requirements and generating awareness are the two main challenges. We have a role to a certain extent, but we also have a partner for implementing this scheme in the MSD, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, through their NSDC. But apart from that, we don't want to limit this to this program to be successful. We want to go beyond the government organizations. We want to also involve Fiki, CII, and ASSOCHAM, and also the private sector. So basically, we need to see that how we ensure that people get enough opportunities to learn the language, to pass that language test, and learn the skills to meet the skill test. So these are the main points were in my mind. And of course, I don't want you to limit on to this discussion because this is a whole East Asia. But of course, I would like to hear from some of you on your thoughts about these two issues, how to really reach that goal of sending our migrants, workers to Japan under that scheme. So with these few words, I want to conclude here, and I am very much looking forward to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for your attention. Now I pass on to Priyadarshika again. Thank you, Priyadarshika.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to request our moderator for the day, Dr. Surabhi Singh, to take over and start the discussion.
Thank you, Priya, and good afternoon, everyone who has joined us today for this panel discussion. Now, I would go on to introduce the panel later, but as the JS has currently pointed out, East Asia is a corridor which is relatively underexplored, and there is a demand for skilled workforce. Aging population is a factor. So there is a huge potential for the movement of skilled workers from India to many of the countries in the region. Sir has already outlined the MOC which has been concluded with Japan and two specific requirements which are there as a result of this MOC, which is the skilling test requirement and the language ability involved. So beyond the MOC with Japan, we also seek to understand other countries in the region and what are the potential opportunities that would also arise in these countries and where there are potentials for concluding something like, say, a labor mobility agreement. So the purpose of today's discussion is to really enrich our understanding regarding the region and also look at the practicalities involved in implementing many of these MOCs. So I would want the panelists to focus their intervention on largely three areas, but you may certainly, given your own competencies, elaborate on more points, which is to identify the sectors where there are potentials for mobility, the skilling ecosystem, the challenges involved, and your assessment in terms of implementing, since many, for instance, CII partner is here as for the TITP. So if there are any challenges involved and what strategies could be employed to leverage the labor market situations in these countries. So those are the few points that I would like you all to cover, but the modality of the discussion as we go forward would be that I would want you to give your presentation or your highlights in a span of 10 to 12 minutes. When 10 minutes are over, I would try and alert you so that you could wind up in the next 2 minutes so that we have some time for discussion towards the end. And thereafter, we'll invite questions from the floor, and we'll try and do, if time permits, 2 rounds of Q&As. And then I'll try and give the floor back to the panel so that you could respond. So that is the pattern we are going to follow. Our first speaker for the day is Mr. Krishnan Narayanan, who is the CIO, Head of Technology with over 27 years of experience in technology leadership in technology and finance services. He is also instrumental in initiating and leading the Japan Technical Intern Training Program from India, along with CII. He's currently the founder of CEO of Nihon EduTech, where he's focused on talent solutions, which include learning, resourcing, and technology, with a special focus on developing bilingual technical skills in niche and emerging areas. So, Mr. Narayanan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Surabhi. Good afternoon to all, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I think it's a very good, rightful juncture, I feel, for discussing these topics, because as Mr. Ramu earlier said, we do need all of us to work together interdependently in order to achieve this opportunity that, is facing us in Japan. I actually wanted to present, from a presentation, but unfortunately, I'm seeing that, I have to be on a desktop app to present. So I'm unable to show the PowerPoint. So I'm going to just walk through, some of my slides. Later on, I will circulate the slides, Surabhi, if you can then forward to everyone. So, just to introduce myself, as earlier said, I'm heading Nihon EduTech in consortium with CII. We are a large, TITP sending organization. We have sent over 100 people so far. But earlier on in my career, I spent, 10 years in Japan myself as part of the early, if you could say, IT migration to Japan in the 90s. So I went and, in fact, that was the first country I went out of India to work in Japan. So sort of, got attached to Japan since then. Now, Japan has opportunities across the board, as earlier everyone mentioned, that, there is both in the highly skilled category, IT and engineers, since I think last 2 years, they have already been opening up for permanent residency, etc. But in the skilled category, in the last 3-4 years, since 2018, when we signed the TITP MOC, and now this year, we have the semi-skilled MOC, is a great opportunity for the blue and gray collar space as well. In the semi-skilled space, of course, Japan calls it as promotion for transfer of skills, technology, and knowledge. It does, also one of the reasons why this is happening is because of the demographic challenge they are having, and the population there, both in terms of population is going down. There is lesser younger people that are available for such activities. Especially because most of the youth are also not going into engineering or this kind of manufacturing. They are going to other areas. Although they are redeploying, women after they are they have born their children, etc. Then still there is a huge shortage that Japan is facing. The labor shortage, as per McKinsey Institute, currently in Japan is sitting at 1.5 million. By the year 2030. So that's a projection. So even if there is a 2.5 times productivity improvement, they can just sustain the current GDP rates. There'll still be a huge shortage for that. And of course, in the highly skilled sectors, they're talking about AI, IoT, cloud, those sort of skills. To the extent that the software market, the projection is somewhere in the range of 800,000 or 8 lakh requirement by 2030 in terms of the software engineers, which is, as I mentioned, AI engineers, mobile application development, cyber security, I mean, the entire gamut of software, applications and IT as new technologies emerge, there's a huge shortage. Now, moving to the specific skill sector, which is of more interest to this group, if you see, Japan opened up the specific skill category only in 2019. It took a little bit of time for us to sign because of, I think, also the intervening corona, etc., delayed the signing. However, Japan at that time in 2019 made a projection of 3.5 lakhs by 2024. Till September of 2020, they had only, allowed 8,700 into Japan. That means pretty much the 3.5 lakhs is still very much an open requirement there in Japan. Even if Corona has subdued the demand, there's a huge, at least 3 lakhs of requirement that's available for skilled worker in Japan, which, all the other countries, of course, Vietnam is the leading of the pack. Currently, Vietnam, almost supplies 50% of whoever is there in the technical intern training program that is getting converted to the skilled worker visa there. So the huge shortage that's going on, I think that gives a huge opportunity for India, for us all to supply. I think, and Vietnam, currently in the technical intern training program, Vietnam is doing almost 100,000 per year. So that's almost 10,000 per month, which I see, that requires, if I have a 6-month training program, I need to have at any point 60,000 people studying Japanese in order to be able to supply continuously at 10,000. That is just in the technical intern program. So if you add the skilled visa and everything, the demand is there, but the supply needs to really scale up, which is one of the big challenge, we'll address a little later on, but that's one of the things that I am also looking at, like how do we increase the supply? One company cannot, sort of bring that in place. I think everybody understands the difference between the technical intern and the skilled worker. Technical intern has a much wider scope, and it doesn't require a huge qualification. You need Japanese studies, of course, because people have to survive for 3 years or 5 years in Japan. Therefore, the language requirement is an important thing in Japan. However, the qualified certification is not required in the TITP or the technical intern space. Whereas the skilled worker, you need at least a minimum of N4 in Japanese. That certificate is important. And also the skill test, as earlier Mr. Ramu also mentioned, and we talked about earlier, there is a requirement for skill certificate, which we need, the individuals have to pass. Of course, the certificate is available for 10 years. So if people can, if our skills education in India can help, people prepare, take the test, get the certificate, then they will be available for 10 years to take up work in Japan. So the skill certificate is something that we can, again expand if we can expand in India. In the case of TITP, there's some skill experience required. So, we do need to make sure people have the right experience in the various sectors. The sectors are very common. And in Japan, there is also a transition. So if anybody goes as a technical intern, after 3 years, they can transfer into the skilled visa program. Then the requirement is a little less because they've already been in Japan. The companies directly accept them. Whereas I think if you're going directly as a skilled visa entrant, you do need to take these tests and then only enter. Looking at some of the categories or the sectors that are accepting, we have a wide variety from care worker in the healthcare sector to I think in manufacturing is a big area, but they've also added a few new sectors in the SSW like building cleaning management, as well as accommodation industry and food services industry for the restaurant, etc. But I would say that, largely, at least for myself, when I speak, we are looking at the automobile mechanic is a huge area. Agriculture has both crop and livestock. We have manufacturing. We have the care worker category. And we also have construction, which is large areas. And I think as per my recent conversation with some of the entities that are operating this in the Japan side. Agriculture, construction, and healthcare, these are some of the top three demand areas in Japan. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Vietnam, is by far the largest supplying. Just from the time when CII and Nihon Nijitech we started in 2017, there was around 80,000 plus from Vietnam. Today, Vietnam has 220,000. So there's a threefold growth just in 4 years they have been able to supply. And their number of per year, as I mentioned earlier, is around 1 lakh. Currently, China has been reducing. The other countries are increasing, but their increase is very flat over the last 4 years. So the large ones being Philippines, Indonesia, they have been flat growth. So Vietnam is the one which has been really, huge supplier. But I think, Vietnam has a limited population, and there's also a huge growth of industry into Vietnam itself, which is slowing down. But why Vietnam is able to do, and India is the only other country that can, pretty much take the place of Vietnam and, achieve the similar growth in the next, say, 3-4 years. The why Vietnam is able to achieve is Vietnam has a huge, all of us know that Vietnam has French as the second language, right, from the time of the Indo-French. However, today, if you go to Vietnam, you will see Japanese is the second language there. So there's huge amount of Japanese training, both in terms of people who have come back from Japan who are having their own training institutes, as well as a lot of Japanese who go and train. So that really has helped in the case of Vietnam. So I want to say that,
2 minutes, Mr.
Sure, yeah. So I want to say that, there is a huge demand, in Japan, almost 3.5 lakh in the semi-skilled sector and, even much higher in the IT sector. But the language requirement and how do we tackle the language requirement, which is a 6-month investment. Currently, we take an approach of if I need 10 people, to be supplied, let's say a customer has given me a requirement of 10 people, I have to take at least 50 people, out of which I then shortlist to a 30 numbers, get the interviews done with the customer, because customer looks for attitude and a variety of, aspects apart from their skill and experience. Then, we can take the 10 or so. So there is a, 2 to 3x or maybe sometimes 4, 5x, in this space, that the reduction happens. And the Japanese language, as I said, it's not very high level. In other words, as CEO mentioned earlier, kanji or the character, Japanese character, that's, the level requirement is low, but we do need to teach them up to N4 level minimum to pass this thing. And so that's, the training requirements that is there. Now, if I may just summarize, like a four or 5 points in terms of what I see as the main challenges. As I mentioned earlier, supply is very short in India. So it's not like I can just search and whenever they want, I can just supply the people. I need to train the people. So I have to hire, train. It takes time, 6 to 8 months to be able to eventually send or meet the demand. The cost of the training is high. N4 for semi-skilled and sometimes N3 for higher skill. However, the people that can go for these labor, they do not have the money, they don't have the funding to pay for these trainings. So it becomes a problem. We have been self-funding, but that will not allow us to scale at the rapid way we want in order to capture, let's say, that place from Vietnam in Japan. The skill test, would be in Japanese, but based on request, skill tests have been changed to English in the case of Philippines, I think. They've even changed it to Bahasa for Indonesia. I think one of the things that Indian government can do is really, work with the Japanese counterparts and get those tests in English, which will allow us to scale in a big way and capture the 300,000 or 3.5 lakhs, requirement that's there. The other small issue is Japanese is not a skill in India. So skill education, it doesn't qualify under the skills benefits, for example, GST, etc., which will add to the cost for the individuals to learn. So that's again, something that we can do to adjust, because other countries have done that. They have allowed for Japanese teaching, Japanese education to really scale to meet the demand. So we need to do that ecosystem here in India. That's one of the challenges. And finally, I think, India as a destination for semi-skilled. I just see that this is where we need to promote a lot. India is seen as the home of IT talent. I am also one of those people who went in as an IT person in Japan. So we are all seen as IT people, smart people. They can't work in the labor area. So I think that's something that we have to, both in terms of our promotions and also through influencing the Japanese companies who are established in India, to promote to their parent companies so that we can send more Indians. So I think those are my sort of thoughts as we start off into this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. Those points were really informative. What I gathered from your intervention was that you mentioned about the Vietnamese model. So perhaps later when we take up the questions, maybe you can come around and let us know if there are any learnings or best practices which hold relevance for India. And also you mentioned about the transition from TITP to SSWs. So how do we see gaining that and capturing that space of transition from TITP to SSW? So those are my 2 points of intervention. Maybe later you can address them. I now move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Gajendra Bhatgujar. He is director at Fiki and is a specialist in the area. He looks after the East Asian region. So over to you, Mr. Gajendra. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Surbi, and thanks, Mr. Abdani Ramuji. I think it's really connect you once again. And Mr. Krishnan Narayanan gave a very broad perspective and capturing both the TITP as well as the new scheme which we have just recently signed. So my presentation or my talk would be basically what Fiki we are doing and how we can supplement ministries or government of India's efforts in for those complementarity and where we can work with each other and supplement government effort in promoting migration or promoting migration towards the East Asian region. So first of all, I would like to thank you for giving this opportunity and sharing Indian industry's perspective on this new development which government of India and agreement and emerging so it's actually very it's a welcome development, and it will only supplement TIT gains. To start with giving TITs broadly how does Fiki work and Fiki's introduction, and then I specifically to some of these initiatives which we are talking here. So Fiki, as you are all aware, is an old organization established in 1927 and represents more than 350,000 companies. And we have more than 16 state offices. And since we are a federation, so we have those regional bodies as well as special associations of our members, including traditions and other smaller association or sector specific associations in our fold. We work in more than 70 sectors, and which covers from agriculture to basically also all the 14 sectors mentioned in this new scheme, and from agriculture to startup to sectors or like with fintech, we are doing a lot of work with Japan. So all those sectors are covered in our different committees. Then we also have special ATA Carnet and RCM or resource conservation and management. So this is so I would not more details on what Fiki does.
Gajendra ji, are you still there?
In this institutional mechanism. The second,
I think your audio is a little disturbed.
Is this better now?
Yes,
is this
much
better now?
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Let me just I think I've just raised the volume. So is this better now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we have different institutional mechanisms. First, I spoke about the India-Japan Business Cooperation Committee, which has been the oldest institutional mechanism with any country, and we would had 43 of this institutional mechanism so far, and the next one is being planned next month. And you would be happy to note that increasingly in the last 3-4 meetings, we have been promoting, though it's hardcore business institutional mechanism, which is focusing on hardcore businesses, but we have been bringing in the element of power to people, or how people to people exchanges or scale, or these could be included in our can help promote India-Japan relationship. So that is one thing that we have been doing, and we continue to do, and more institutional mechanism that we have is through our Fiki's Forum of Parliamentarians. Through this, what we do, we take the parliamentarians or Japan closer to states. So, in fact, the morning when I was informed about this particular session, we had a session going on with Karnataka state. So, for this, our chair, General Secretary, and Poonam Mahajan, and so they lead this initiative from the parliamentarian side, and Ambassador of Japan was also there. So here we take these including these new schemes also we promote through these states outreach. And so this is a second very important initiative, institutional mechanism that we have in 5 states, and in 5 states dialogue with states initiative of this. Third is we not recently now launched an forum Japan Ambassador and we are doing a lot of activities, especially in this segment, which we are now focusing. And in fact, next month we are going to have a very specific program, which I think which very close to this particular scheme of yours, where we are. There is a Japanese lady in Gurgaon, and uh, she runs a Sakura Institute, which is also an agency, and so basically she empowers local Indians or local Indians, lower level, and then upgrade their skill set and employ them in those building cleaning and other such jobs, and also helping them, it's also helping them get employed in Japan. So I think this is one more aspect that we are doing, and which we will try to promote, I think, through this particular scheme. Then our president also had a great discussion with because our immediate past president, which is Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, and Dr. Sangeeta Reddy the whole group of hospitals, and they also have different nursing schools. So that is one more area where we would want to give more trainings to these nurses them and utilize this particular SSW scheme which we have recently signed. To this, I think there is a great initiative that we are taking, which is greater 50%. This is specifically dedicated to women empowerment. And in this, we not only we empower women at the grassroots level or medium level or professional level, or even to skill them to make them independent directors, or up to the level of family-owned entrepreneurs, or women who could be given sufficient training, or empowering them to even take up later roles of owning their family-owned businesses. So that's and including gender equality. So this is one initiative which we are doing under Fiki ladies organization. It's called Greater 50%. And there are several. I think we will later on share with you more details of this particular program, and I think some elements of it could fit in with this scheme or this particular aspects which we are talking here. And I think, as you all know, our Secretary General is he was a CEO of NSDC. So skill and education is very, very close to skill development, and training is very, very close to his heart. So would like to supplement of India, would like to in any of these initiatives. I think Mr. Krishna Narayanan has already given a very detailed account of the challenges that we are facing. And basically, yeah, we also tried from our end, and I think that the challenge remained that the cost of training is too high, and the people who we need to train, they don't have that kind of money. And getting is not very easy. So that is a little cumbersome and a long process. So that is another thing which I would want to highlight here. And with regard to sectors, I think 14 sectors, most of the sectors where we can promote the movement of personnel from these. I think most of the sectors are covered. I would specifically most sectors out to highlight electronics as well, in addition to the three sectors, healthcare and agri, which Mr. Krishna Narayanan already pointed out, because electronics is one more sector where we have developed some capabilities and can also gain through by moving some of them to Japan or some of these countries. So that's one more thing which I would like to highlight. Apart from all this, I think the one major factor which had helped India over the years, when we look at our migration to Australia or US or UK, is the education part. Many of us went there for education, and then basically built on that. So that's why our diaspora there is huge, and we are gaining from whether it's repatriation of income or anything. So that's where I think the getting more universities promote Indian students to these countries long way in making up these numbers that we are looking at. So because so far there is attraction for US, because we are all speaking people, so we have a tendency of going to US or UK for education, or Australia or Canada. But in East Asian countries, obviously language is a barrier, plus side. So I think education is going to get them segment where we should promote, and in fact we should encourage their governments to promote, so that we can pool to going forward. And these are things which I would like to highlight, and I would also like to assure ministry and government our full cooperation in any of these sectors, whether and since through our sectoral committees or through our, we would be happy to supplement government's effort in this regard. And thanks, Surbhi, thanks for giving us this opportunity. I think this is it from my.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through the various institutional mechanisms which Fiki has instituted with respect to specifically Japan. Perhaps you may also ponder and come back to us later in the Q&A on what role do you see for Fiki in implementing these schemes, and for instance, looking at the new MOC with Japan and in terms of the implementation aspects of the MOC. With that, I would now move to our third speaker, who is Mr. Maninder Singh, who is from the Associated Chambers of Commerce and Industry. He has a bachelor's in social law from ILS School, Pune, and further LLB from Pune University. And he has set up various projects in India and abroad with respect to waste heat recovery technologies, energy efficiency management, and first ever run on the hydroelectric technology along with various environmental and green projects. He's the co-chairman on National Council on Skill Development and Entrepreneurship in ASSOCHAM. Mr. Singh, you have 10 minutes. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Surbhi ma'am, all the panelists, all the listeners and people around. It's a very good evening. See, Mr. Krishnan has rightly put up all the details on Japan that we were looking for. Probably I would start by adding 2 or 3 points, which I think could be of some use. One is that, like we discussed on Vietnam, Philippines, and all contributing largely to Japan, we can try to identify some areas where they might have not contributed that much, which we can take up at priority from India, because since we have such a large population and we have the capacity to fill any place in the world. That is what I personally think. Apart from that, see, Japan, even though the MOC is signed now, the project has been since 2008. Places which needs a lot of attention from the government to support the training of students. Mr. rightly pointed out that period of 6 months or 9 months of N5 or N4 language training is the pain area for the candidate. Their time, and because also of the experience what India has always had, which is the experience of Middle East worker category, where you really don't need to struggle for 6 to 9 months to be going to a Middle East nation. You can do it pretty faster. So all those things put together, Japan is one thing. But coming to the most important thing, which is the topic that we are on today, emerging destinations. So Japan is something we have got today, tomorrow, or day after. We will excel in this. It's just about synchronizing and getting the right tune. Organizations like Mr. Krishnan's Nihon are leading this, and I'm sure they will set very strong examples in the future also. People will follow their footsteps and make it big for number of trainees going there. Apart from that, what we need to really figure out is that how we can, through ICM and with chambers, like I represent ASSOCHAM, and we are more than happy to contribute in this particular cause more than what anybody can think. So an institute like ICM can get in tie-ups or associations with us, Fiki or CII or anybody like that, to try and form some committees or some specialized group of people who can take care of particular continents. So if it is East Asia which is coming up, or if it is eastern countries of Africa which are coming in, or probably an opportunity came in through Israel last year, something like that, we should have some kind of specific committees working on specific parts to gauge what best can be done, to engage with the embassies and to engage with their governments to get the opportunities on the table, because opportunities are there. These embassies, these foreign governments, they want Indians, but they're afraid of a lot of practices which at times bring a bad name. And this one industry has been thriving on a lot of plus minus ever since. We know how Ministry of Labor is able to monitor and get hold of the people going to Middle East. There are so many problems happening there. So people want some kind of security and quality to happen. So how we can bring things on the table is very, very important for all of us to think about. And I take this opportunity to give you a case study. So what happened was that in 2019, in around September, October, I personally made a visit to the embassy of Israel, as we came to know that Israel wants some care workers or nurses to which their government is paying the salaries, and they need it to a tune of almost 5,000 to 10,000 every year. So we went to Israel embassy, we spoke to the relevant people, including their consulate heads, and they told us that we are more than happy to collaborate with India. I showed them the TIT model also. They were very happy and scandalized to see that something like that is already happening. They wanted it to be organized. So I wrote to them, spoke to them, got them together over the email, introduced them, but nothing moved. Then in one of the events, I'm sure, which we had attended with you last time, after that event, we had sent some presentation on this same model, but then the COVID thing came and we could not do much about it. So, these kind of things are floating in the market and we need to channelize this. One thing that TITP has been able to do is to form a business model outside the total purview of the government. And that is, I feel, the best way to promote any program which is about migration from India to any country outside. Similarly, if we talk about Israel, similarly, if we talk about East African countries, similarly, talk about East Asian countries, the potential is there, the requirements are there. Just last week, we got a requirement from Russia, one of my companies, where they're looking for some 150 unskilled labor to work in a fertilizer plant, right? So I was just speaking to our Russian counterparts and trying to know how they're doing it, what they're doing, what kind of things they are giving to the candidates who are coming, like secure, like the ticket holding, language support. They are more than happy to design programs like we want, because they want people who can work on the ground. And nobody better than India has that kind of strength to supply this kind of manpower to anybody in the world. So when our Prime Minister says that India should be the skill capital of the world, I'm sure it has a lot of depth. I'm sure it has a lot of meaning to it. And that meaning can be capitalized only when we have special task forces for various continents, if not countries, where dedicatedly we have an action plan. Okay, that ICM along with ASOCHAM is taking care of Israel. ICM along with Fiki is taking care of East African countries. ICM along with CII, I'm just taking names, right? But that is kind of model which I feel is missing from the industry right now. And now since ICM is there, we have a, we expect from you that you take lead in this and try to fill this gap. Because imagine if people from Israel are looking for Indian government to come to them and formulate something through which they can standardize or channelize the workers going from India to Israel. There will be many others also, because India Israel has a lot of MOUs. India and Israel share a lot of friendship, a lot of support to each other. And then there are countries who are not that close to India, but they also need a lot of workers. Right. So, these kind of things we need to pen down, bring them on ground and get them going. As ASOCHAM, we have always been supporting and contributing to all these aspects very, very openly. We don't think that we are an organization. We think that we are dedicated to this cause, and whatever best we can do, we can. So if you tell us, if you give us a responsibility also to fulfill, we have no problems. If you want our support in setting up an office for this, if you want our support to put 2 people dedicated on the task, we have no problems, provided we make a plan that's workable. We make a plan that is commercial. At the same time, it brings sustainability to a level just like TITP is doing, just like any other such program has been doing since years from India. All right, so those are the areas where we think we can contribute. We are already doing. Even ASTOCHAM is an empaneled body like Nihon for TITP, and we have also sent some 60-odd candidates to Japan. We are training more, sending more as the time comes. At the same time, we get these kind of opportunities where we know that possibilities are there, but from the government side, we need something, especially from the MEA, right? Not Ministry of Labor. I repeat, from MEA, not Ministry of Labor, right? So you have to, get into the lead with all of us who are together as panelists today, right? And make a plan, we have no problem. You put us to task, you put us to job, and we should actually achieve things, and we should bring them on the table. That's the most important thing. So there's no harm going to these kind of embassies or ambassadors or consulates to make relationships better and to give them a kind of confidence that yes, you follow this channel and you get what you want, right? And when we talk about employment, that is a major concern right now in India. We all know that the foreign employment not only brings value to that individual's family, it brings exposure, it brings foreign exchange to the country, it brings so many multiple benefits. So we really need to work on these things after the conference is over, to put them to action. Well, that is all what I wanted to share. And now, since COVID is settling and people are going to open up for meetings or things like that, I'm sure that as ASSOCHAM, we are going to bring a lot of things on the table and ground. And we expect support from ICM and all other industry stakeholders to stand tall with us and try and make some other successful models like TITP with other nations also. Thank you so much. That is all what I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Your point regarding increasing collaboration with industry chambers is well taken care of. Perhaps as one of the implementing agencies of TITP, maybe you could ponder and later come in terms of what learnings you've had from the TITP, which can be improved on in future programs. Maybe you could share your thoughts on that later. Moving on to our last speaker of the day, but certainly not the least. He brings us a perspective from a totally different region, which is from the Korean Peninsula. So Dr. Otujit Shetri-Mayum is a fellow at the VV Giri National Labour Institute. He's a development professional with 12 years of evidence-based policy research, impact evaluation, project management, and monitoring. He has written numerous papers. His publications include Skill Development in India and Contributions of Korean Companies, Skilling India, Contribution of Korean Companies, Mapping Social Contribution of Foreign Companies, a case of corporate social responsibilities of Korean companies in India. So Dr. Otujit, you have 10 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shrubi. I think am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Okay. My panelists have talk about to the skill and other issues related to migration, the migrant workers, basically talking about the Indian migrants. So here I will be talking about the case of Republic of Korea. And at the end, Dr. Shrubi has mentioned in her introductory remarks that when we talk about these East Asian countries, so we could see the declining birth rate and the issue of aging. When we talk about Japan as a country, we could see many issues going on in terms of aging population. And likewise, when we talk about the Republic of Korea, that is South Korea, we also have that similar kind of trends that is happening in this particular country. And so South Korea's declining birth rate demonstrates a need for immigration, whether ethnically Korean or otherwise, and that need is growing. And this is where we really need to, and this particular topic of the panel discussion is very, very apt. It's very timely when we talk about exploring the possibilities of international migration for the Indian workers. So it is very, very significant, so to say, when we try to look at the neighboring countries, particularly the East Asian countries, there are a lot of potentials for the Indian workers, so to say, both highly skilled or maybe blue collar workers also. So taking into consideration about this declining birth rate in the Republic of Korea, as I said before, that there is a huge opportunities coming up for the other international migrants, including India. So when we try to look at some of the data, so it's very interesting because I'm just building up my argument why it is very significant for a country like India, where we have this huge human resources. Now India is one of the youngest country, or is basically the youngest country in the world with a lot of human capital, human resources in terms of the youth population. And so we have very much huge potential for the Indian youth to explore in this area. And in this particular country, we could see the number of deaths recorded in South Korea over the past year exceeded the birth rate, causing this country's population to decline. And if I could like to share some data, in 2020, it was recorded that around 3.07 lakh people died in South Korea and only 2.75 lakh babies were born. So we could see the decline in the birth. So there is a fall of about 10% from the preceding year, that's 2019. And this particular data speaks a lot of volume in terms of when you try to analyze the countries like human resources, also to the birth rate. And it is very important for us to understand, because it is going to be a big challenge, big issue, big crisis in the years to come. And some of the data, some of the studies have reported that the Koreans, the South Korea's population declined from 1.49% in 2010 to 0.05% by 2019. And this, if we go by this trend, and it is reported that by the year 2067, there would be like a 3.9 crore population only, as compared to now, it's 5.18 crore in today's time. So, and there will be a problem of aging also. Like it is reported that about 46% of people will be above 64 years of age. So they are going to have a huge, labor crisis in the terms of requirement for labor in Republic of Korea in the years to come. And some of the basic reasons, like why we see there is a lot of decline or low rate of birth in the country, is because there is a reluctance to offer maternity leave, as well as high real estate prices, which dissuade young couples from buying a house and starting a family. So these are some of the reasons which are being shown by some of the studies. And we all know that when we talk about this declining birth rate and the issue of aging population, so we could see that it creates labor shortages, which have a major detrimental impact on the economy. So when you talk about production, definitely manufacturing, definitely we require labor. So in this particular country, in the case of South Korea, we could see there's going to be a huge labor shortage in the years to come. And it is going to create an impetus to migrate. And this is where we really need to work on, as many of the co-panelists have explained about the case of Japan. Japan is also a similar case when you talk about the aging population, the labor shortage, a lot of problem in terms of requirement for labor. So, and it is also very significant for us to again highlight that there are, technically, when you talk about technical training, because Korean is one of the countries in the world where we have a huge number of technical persons, because they are quite skilled. When you talk about vocational training also, they are, almost 90-95% of their populations are skill trained. And the issue here is that when we talk about these educated youth, they are really not keen to work in small and medium enterprises. Basically, they are looking for jobs in biggest firms or the bigger firms like the chaebols, which are known as the conglomeration of these larger companies. So one of the studies reported in 2017 argued that, or point out that, nearly 70% of South Koreans between the ages of 25 and 34 had a college degree, but they were not keen to work for any other sectors other than the biggest firms. And despite high rates of unemployment for young adults, many are unwilling to consider working in the areas where workers are mostly urgently needed. So this refers to many of the small and medium enterprises. And this is where we really need to explore what are the possibilities of Indian workers to be migrating to the Republic of Korea and trying to fill this particular gap, where we could see a lot of major labor shortage in small and medium enterprises. And some of these sectors, if we try to look at, so South Korea's small and medium enterprises mainly need workers in the field of, in the sectors related to agriculture, fishing, manufacturing, and construction. And these are among the other blue-collar sectors, which inherently mismatch with the employment expectation of South Korean young adults. So this is one of the major challenges that the society or the Korean economy right now is facing. And one of the reports mentioned that nearly 80.5% of the small and medium enterprises said that they were unable to find workers. 80.5% of small and medium enterprises in South Korea reported that they were unable to find workers. So that means there are so many other nitty and gritties of like trying to build a kind of a relation or economic relations. I think we have co-panelists from Fiki, Ascertaining, and also they know about it. They have high experience on this particular. So we really need to find out what are the possibilities of building a network or building a link with Korean business organizations, so that the Indian workers can really fill this particular gap. So there's a huge potential for the Indian workers to fill this particular gap if we have better understanding, better collaboration with the other counterparts in South Korea. So this is where we really need to explore from Indian business houses. And one issue related to the migrants workers in South Korea is that we have this system of employment permit system, that is EPS. This is employment permit system, which is practiced in the Republic of Korea. So we could see that there's a skill mismatch, which led to South Korea to bring in migrant workers through its employment permit system to work in SMEs that employ fewer than 300 employees. But there are many studies where we found that because of this EPS, that means the workers who had come through by getting this EPS system, that is employment permit system in South Korea, had a lot of issues in terms of working conditions, decent work, social security. So these are also some of the issues that we really look into, considering the fact that like many of the workers who had come from Thailand. So there was a recent report that many workers from Thailand who had been working in Republic of Korea's SMEs had really faced major labor issues, labor crisis, or maybe social security issue or working condition issues. So that has been reported. And we also need to understand there are documented workers and undocumented workers also. And we also know that there are many Indian companies who are operating in Republic of Korea. We have TCS, we have Maninder & Maninder, and other companies which have or which employs Indian workers in this particular companies. And apart from them, we also have into other Korean companies, like we talk about Samsung, we talk about Hyundai, we talk about LG. These are major South Korean companies which also have its presence in India also. And apart from that, there are also many Indian workers, Indian skilled workers, so to say, who are employed in these big companies in Korea also. And if you talk about the Indians in South Korea, it was reported that in 2019 we had around 13,236 Indians based in South Korea, and mostly they have come through employment visa, working in Hyundai, Samsung, LG, Tata, Daewoo, or TCS, Maninder & Maninder, who had work permit for about 1 to 3 years and and extended for another maybe about 2 years or 3 years. And we also have many association, community association in the country, in South Korea, where we had Indians in Korea. Then we have Indian Merchants Association. Then other communities like Tamil Association, like Marathi Association. We have then Telugu Association. They have even for Manipuri Association in Korea. So that means the presence of people from India, from different states, are very much there in the Republic of Korea, in this particular country. So that is what I'm trying to highlight here is that we have people migrating from India, from different states, from different communities, which are based in South Korea. So we also need to expand this particular presence from different states, from different regions of the country in South Korea. And finally, when we talk about the bilateral and cultural relations between these two countries, it started if you talk about the bilateral, it started way back in 1962 and 1973. Then we talk about the economic relations, JEPA in 2010, and the bilateral trade in 2011. And interestingly, significantly, I just wanted to put forward that we have a close interconnection in terms of the cultural encounters and confluence between India and Korea. And one of the princes, it was recorded that one of the princes from Ayodhya, whose name is Suriratna, was married to King Suro of South Korea, of the Kingdom of Korea, so to say, and she was given the name of King. So that means we have a close cultural relations, not only economic relations, which are evolving throughout these years, but we also have a very close cultural relation between South Korea. So we really need to explore this particular cultural relations for our benefit, for the benefit of both the countries. And interestingly, we could see many initiatives by the government of India in terms of.
Sorry, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just winding up. And it is also very fascinating to see the role of the Korean government, and we have this Korea Culture Center in New Delhi, which is really doing a wonderful job in terms of providing the cultural studies, or the providing information, knowledge about the Korean culture. And importantly, and most significantly, we were discussing about this language, the issue related to languages, the Korean language or the Japanese language, when we talk about the employing Indian workers there in these countries. And this Korean Culture Center has really initiated in terms of providing Korean language in India, and they have already tied up with many schools, like 105 schools in India, in terms of providing Korean language training. And they have already started this Korean institution called state-run Korean Language Institute called King Sejong Institute, and they have opened their branches in 7 centers in India, in 7 places in India. And so that means they have been doing a lot of in terms of providing, because they are trying to share or bring awareness to the students in terms of the Korean culture and also the language, the Korean language. So that means in terms of their efforts, we could see that this will definitely help the youth generation, the coming generation, to understand the culture better, so that there's an opportunity for the youth to find jobs or employment opportunities in Republic of Korea. And for that matter, we also need to have some initiatives from the Indian embassy there in South Korea. And we also have Indian Cultural Center, which is also doing a similar kind of activities in the Republic of Korea in terms of providing Hindi training, Hindi language training, then other cultural awareness. So we really need to work together because, as I said, there's a huge potential for Indian migrants, particularly in the Republic of Korea in the years to come. So we really need to explore this particular area where we can find a lot of opportunities for the Indian migrants. Thank you.
Thank you. We were really enjoying your presentation, but unfortunately I had to cut short because of paucity of time. Those were some of the very valid and informative points that you made. And it's very interesting to note that while there are educated Koreans, there's a paradox that the small and medium skill sector does not find workers. And you also mentioned about the EPS schemes under which MOUs have already been signed by Korea with a host of countries in the Southeast Asian and some of the countries of the South Asian region. Perhaps you may also ponder and come back to us on what India can do with respect to leveraging this labor market in Korea. So you mentioned about embassy. So it is my great pleasure to say that we have a representation amongst us from the Embassy of India in Tokyo. We have with us Shri Karan Yadav, who is First Secretary, Information, Education and Culture in the Embassy of India in Tokyo. Perhaps he would like to share with us some views very briefly on today's session. Shri Yadav. Can you hear us? Can you
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, but you'll have to keep your camera stationary so that we could also see.
Yeah, I'm just trying. I'm trying. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Yes. So thanks to JSOIA that he provided me this opportunity for joining the session. And about me, I'm Karan Yadav. I'm First Secretary looking after information, education and culture at Embassy of India, Tokyo. And as ma'am has rightly pointed out, that I'm looking after skill mobilization, not only the blue collar job, but even the white collar jobs. me and my colleague, Mr. Gaurav Gupta, we act as a team, and under the guidance of our seniors, like we have Consular Political, Mr. Brahma Kumar, DCM, Mr. Mayank Joshi, and Ambassador, Mr. Sanjay Kumar Verma. We do a lot of, in last like 1.5 years, we have tried many companies who are working as HR companies in Japan, and they have, because the reason is simple, as mentioned by one of the panelists, that there is interest among foreign employers to recruit people from India. So when it comes to blue collar jobs, India and Japan already have TITP signed, and under that we have at present around 200 interns who have come to Japan in different categories, and the most important category is care workers. So recently we have signed the specified skilled workers agreement, and under the guidance of our JS OIA 1, the framework for the SSW is being finalized, and I think soon we will have a very well-designed framework under which the movement of SSW workers will start. SSW will have an edge over TITP because it gives a long-term stay in Japan for any worker, and Japan is actually looking for long-term stay. So now I think gradually they are graduating to SSW, and I think within 4 or 5 years they may give up TITP or may not, but they will look for candidates under SSW. As one of the panelists, Mr. Singh from Ascertaining, rightly said that Ascertaining, as well as the speaker before, that Japan and I think even the East Asia, it's a typical job market. The challenges for Indian skilled workers, either blue or white collar, first of all, it's the language. Without knowing the language, you can't like enjoy the cultural value. And there are cases where students and skilled workers and even professionals who came to Japan, but within 6 months or 1 year, they returned back either to their parent companies in other countries or to India because they could not find that enjoyment in the society. Because culturally it's different. If you don't know the language, you can't mix with the people. Though there is a gradual use of English as a medium of instruction or as a medium of communication, but it's still, I think, the society is still far away from actually speaking in English with foreigners. When it comes to the other challenges, they are like food, then the salaries. Somebody rightly pointed out that for high-skilled professionals, US and other countries are the preferable markets because the salaries are good, and despite the salary, the savings are good. But in case of Japan, this is a truth which we have to tell to all the candidates who want to come to Japan, that in the initial years there will be very less savings. So they can't have the huge expectation from the Japan job market. Vis-a-vis Japan give you a better quality life. Okay, so you can't like always go for financial benefits. You have to go for even the aesthetic benefits. So when you come to Japan, you have a very, very comfortable life. There is no like it's a hassle-free life. Everything happens as per rule. There are no cars, and you know ill wills in the society, which also attract many candidates to come to Japan and live there for a long time. When it comes to number of professionals in Japan, if I compare the number of Indians in Japan, it has rise from 27,000 in 2015 to more than 40,000 in December 2019. So it itself shows that there is a huge increase in the number of Indians, and there are more than 12 to 30,000 high-skilled professionals, and it is going to increase only. Recently, Japan has shown interest, or even now in the interest on the policy level, that is from the top level. There is a race to bring Japan as a financial hub, because when in the region there are issues happening, so Tokyo can be a next financial hub, and government of Japan is now considering inviting foreign nationals, be it IT engineers, or be it accountants, be it auditors, be it financial people, or in the same related fields. Recently, Ambassador gave a presentation to the LDP, which is the ruling party of Japan. They have a foreign workers committee, and Ambassador gave the presentation. Post presentation, it was promised that the minutes of the meeting will be shared at higher level, and I hope that has happened, because recently we have been contacted by the concerned Ministry of Japan to understand the process, how to enhance the how to attract more and more Indians, high-skilled professionals to Japan. So we are working on it. In the due course, we will share the like suggestions with the MEA as well, for sharing with other sister ministries, and so that we can have some kind of a structured mechanism to have more and more high-skilled professionals to Japan. As suggested by the ministry, we are also working on the MMPA agreement, which will enable the movement of high-skilled workers from India to Japan. India and Japan has a lot of MOCs in the related fields, be it Japanese language, be it education, be it culture, and SSW, TITP I have already covered. And good thing is that we have social, like the transfer of social benefits. We have an agreement since 2016. So that's all from my side. And thanks for giving the platform. And I think if we will have more such interactions so that we can share the knowledge among each other. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing the updates on many of the initiatives that government is taking. We will now open the floor for questions. I would request you all to be brief in your remarks, and also mention, if possible, who is the question addressed to. So I have Mr. Suresh Kumar, who has some intervention to make. So Dr. Suresh Kumar. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Good afternoon. Can I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And it is indeed pleasure that ICM is encouraging and taking initiative to utilize our manpower to various countries apart from GCC. The latest example of the recent labor mobility agreement signed between India and Japan on the transfer of specified skilled workers, which shows that now India can benefit from the gaps in the labor market of this never destination of international migration. Because as all the speakers have said, that actually the main barrier is the aging population in both these countries like Japan and South Korea. And the biggest challenge is the language barrier. And Mr. Maninder Singh has said that actually the experienced people can be available from Middle East, and the language training can be done in India, and we should have an ecosystem to do this thing. Then we can utilize our manpower to be sent to these East Asian countries. And being the member of human resource agencies, and this process we are doing for the last 40 years. And in case if we can able to bridge let's say, even if in case if we can have a collaboration with the ministry and the recruitment fraternity, this training of languages can be taken care, and we can utilize the maximum number of our employees to various this Far and Eastern Asian countries, and that's what I want to tell. And a lot of opportunities, because the recent agreement signed, basically if you see that the nursing care, building, cleaning, material processing, industrial machinery and manufacturing, electric and electronics information, construction, shipbuilding and ship-related industry, automobile, aviation, lodging, agriculture, fisheries and food and beverage. All these recruitments were doing by this recruitment industry for many years, and it will be easy for us to train this candidates on their language and utilize their skill for this these countries.
Thank you. That will come to an end of today's discussion. It was very enriching, and we learned so many things about some of the schemes that are already being implemented by Government of India, some which are in the pipeline, the newer corridors, and the various initiatives we need to do or to improvise with respect to encouraging mobility in these newer corridors. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today and for making this discussion a very vibrant and enriching one. And we'll hope that you will continue joining ICM in many more such endeavors that we'll seek to do in future as well. I think I will now request Priyadarshika for any last minute things that we need to do before we close.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we close, may I request everybody to just turn on their cameras for a while so we may take a virtual group picture together. Just a second. Just waiting for everybody's camera to turn on. Just 5 more seconds, please. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Surabhi. Thanks. Thank you.